So now let's head over to Pokedex.js, and right over here we want to design this Pokedex component or container. First of all, we want to use the box elements, and we will import this from material UI/core, and VS Code automatically imports it for us, but if it doesn't, make sure you import that. And now inside it we want to basically get the data from the Pokemon API, and we want to check if that Pokemon data exists. Then we actually make a grid container, and we map over the Pokemon data and show the Pokemon cards. So before we do anything now, we need to actually get the Pokemon data from the API. So to do this, we need to implement the useeffect hook, and we import this as well. So let's do useeffect, and it should automatically import it for us. Yes, it did from React. Oh no, it didn't. So let's import it ourselves. So we're just going to use do curly braces and then import it using object T structuring. And now we can use this useeffect. So useeffect is going to be just like component did mount. When the component is actually when this component is mounted, then the useeffect hook is called, and we can apply whatever we want. So in our case, when this component is actually loaded, we want to get the data from the API, from the Pokemon API, and then set it inside the hook. So just to summarize, as soon as this web page is loaded, it will automatically go and fetch the data from the Pokemon API, and it will set it inside our hook, and then we can take this data and show it to the user. So now what we need to do is we need to use Axios to get the data. So Axios is a HTTP client. I'm sure you know I'm sure you've used this before. So we need to install it using npm install Axios, and also -s as well. We need to do that so we can save it. So -s to save it in our package JSON. So now we need to use Axios. We're going to do axios.get, and it automatically imports it for us. Okay, we will do axios.get, and then now we can pass in the URL which we want to use and get the data from. So we have to keep this project organized. Instead of putting the URL over here, we can do this. Let's just do this right now and console.log it just to make sure we're getting the data. So we'll do axios.get the actual Pokemon API URL. So now we can paste in this Pokemon URL. I will also include these URLs as well inside the text file, so you can use it, so you can copy and paste it. We also want to apply the limit as well, because there's too many Pokemons. We can't get all of them. We want to apply a limit of around 800, let's say. And now we want to use the .then function. So after it fetches the data from this URL, it will call the .then function, which is returning a promise, and we can receive the data using arrow function. So we'll receive a response, and we want to console.log that response. Or we want to console.log the response.data, because we just want to get the data. And let's see if we can actually get this data. So if we go and inspect elements on the console tab, and it's giving us an object, and inside this object we are getting the results, and the results has 800 Pokemons. So we have many arrays, and we are receiving the Pokemons as we expected. So let's keep everything clean. We need to make a config folder so we can put in all these constants, like for example the URLs, the special API keys if we want to use them. So we'll need to get all of this and put it in one place, and we'll put this inside the config folder. So inside the config folder, we want to now make an index.js file. So we make an index.js file, and now we can export these URLs. So we'll do export const Pokemon API URL, and then we can set it to the actual URL, which is we'll get it again from Pokedex. We can copy and paste this, but we don't want the limits. We just want the actual URL. Now we can paste it over here, and we can now depend on this variable inside index in config.js. Inside index.js in the config folder. So we just have to now do Pokemon API URL capitals, and automatically should find it from the index.js file. So now we also want to do plus the limits as well, so we can limit the data. And now when we're receiving this response, we want to now get the results from response.data. Before we do anything, we need to check if the status is successful, if our response is actually successful in getting the data. So to do this, we just have to do if response.status is between 200 and 300. So if it's bigger than 200 and if it's smaller than 300, so if it's bigger than or equal to 200, and if response.status is smaller than 300, then that means we have successfully received the data, and we can now get this data and store it inside our hook, and then iterate over these Pokemons and show them to the user. So now what we can do is we can make const results. We can use object destructuring to get the Pokemons, to get the results from the response.data. So we'll do const results, and we'll do equals response.data. So we're getting the results from response.data. And we now want to make a Pokemon data array. So we'll do const, we'll do let new Pokemon data equals array, empty array. And now we want to loop over the Pokemons that we have received from the results from the API. So we'll do results.forEach. We'll use the forEach method so that we can iterate over each result, which is each Pokemon basically, because each item in the results is a Pokemon, and we can receive this Pokemon using this for each function. It will give us the Pokemon, and it will also give us the index for each iteration. So for each iteration it iterates, it will give us the Pokemon and the index of that Pokemon inside the results. So what we want to do now is we want to make a new Pokemon object. So we'll do let Pokemon object is equal to, we'll make it into a JSON object, and inside this we'll give it an ID, and we will also give it a URL, and this URL is going to be the image URL. So for the ID we're going to give it index, so whatever the index is, that will be the ID for this Pokemon. And for the URL we'll do image API URL, so we need to make a image API URL inside our index.js from config. So right over here we need to make export const image API URL, and we will set this to a link that I will include in a text file. So this is our image API URL, and we can go to our Pokedex again, and for the URL we'll set it to image API URL plus the actual index, so it's already imported it for us, as it should do, and then we can do plus index, sorry, not capitals, and then plus.png. Also for the index we also need to increment it, because the first Pokemon starts with the ID of 1, and in our case we have ID of 0, so we need to do index plus plus right before we make the object. So right before we do the object, we'll do index plus plus, so that we can increment the index. Okay. Finally, we need to also set a name for this Pokemon object. So we'll do name Pokemon.name. So we're just getting the name property from the Pokemon. So just to summarize with what we are doing over here, we are making a new Pokemon object, and we are giving it an ID based on the index. We're just incrementing the index because Pokemon IDs, they start off with 1, not from 0. And for the image URL, we're setting it inside the URL property for that Pokemon object, and we are getting the image API URL. We're using that image API URL which we have stored inside our config, inside the index file inside config, and this is the image API URL which we have imported and used. And then we also set the name for the Pokemon using the Pokemon.name, which we are using from the API. Okay, so let's console.log this Pokemon object so we can see if it's actually working as it should be. So let's actually console.log the Pokemon object and the Pokemon. So first we'll console.log the Pokemon object, and we'll make this to a string so we know that it's a Pokemon object. And then we'll now copy and paste this and do Pokemon object. So this is a Pokemon object, not Pokemon. And we'll copy paste this and then change it to Pokemon, because the Pokemon object is the one that we are making, and the Pokemon is the original one that we have received from the API. So instead of limit 800, we'll just do limit 8 because we don't want to have 800 Pokemon. Select elements and look at our console tab. Right over here in the console, we can see we have Pokemon object and we have Pokemon. Pokemon object is what we have made. As you can see, we have ID 1, and we go to the second one, we'll have ID 2, so on and so forth. So this is the second one, it has ID 2, and we have the name of the Pokemon, and we have also the image, which we set inside the URL property. And for the other Pokemon object, so this is the Pokemon object, so right now we are using the Pokemon.name to add it inside the name of our Pokemon. And if we look at this Pokemon object, it will have a name, it will have a URL, and it will also have prop types. So now we are receiving this data and we are making our Pokemon object. Now what we need to do, we need to push this, we need to push the new Pokemon data, the new Pokemon object that we have just done. We need to push it inside the new Pokemon data. So we just have to do new Pokemon data dot push. So we're basically collecting all the Pokemons that we're making, all the Pokemon objects that we're making. So Pokemon data, new Pokemon data, sorry, dot push Pokemon object. So we're pushing the Pokemon object that we have just made inside the array. Now after we have finished looping through all the Pokemons in our API, we now want to set the new Pokemon data object, because now we have a collection of Pokemons, we have an array of Pokemons. We want to set that inside our hook, inside our state. So to do this, we're going to import usestate, just like we done for useeffect. We're going to import usestate, and this will allow us to set state and also read the state. So we're going to import it from React, and right over here we're going to do set Pokemon data. So the first one is going to be just Pokemon data, and the second one is set Pokemon data. So Pokemon data will allow us to read the Pokemon data and access it, and set Pokemon data will allow us to set the Pokemon data, just like the name says. And initially we want to make it an empty array. So when we first build this component, it will have an empty array of Pokemons, and when we set it, it will set the Pokemon data array inside the state. Now to do this, now we can use the set Pokemon data. So let's do set Pokemon data right over here, and we'll pass in the Pokemon, the new Pokemon data, which is the array. And now we can access this data inside our box, inside the web page, and show the user all the Pokemons. So right over here, let's basically check if we have Pokemon data loaded. So to do this, we're going to use the curly braces so we can set our JS expressions and put in some JS code here. And inside this, we want to now check if Pokemon data has a truthy value, so it's not null. And if it is, if it's initialized, then we can loop over the Pokemon data. So to do this, we just do Pokemon data dot map, and the map function will allow us, will give us the Pokemon, and it will also give us the index as well with it. We don't need the index, so we can just leave that. And right over here we can return a h1, so we will return the name of the Pokemon. Obviously this is not going to be the final application, this is just testing if we are actually receiving the Pokemon data and everything is working as it should be. And so this is the first, so we're checking if Pokemon data is initialized, then we're looping over the Pokemon data. Otherwise we're going to now display a circular progress. So we'll do a colon now, and this is going to be in the state where Pokemon data is null. So if Pokemon data has doesn't have any data, then we'll show them a loading progress bar, a circular progress. So we can import circular progress from material UI core library, and we can show it to the user if the Pokemon data hasn't been loaded. So let's go ahead and test this out, and as you can see we have 8 Pokemons right over here. Well, not 8 Pokemons, but 7 Pokemons. So if we go back to our VS Code, we can increase the limits. Well, we have limit 8 now, let's change it to 800, and let's see, as you can see now we have 800 Pokemons being displayed. So we need to also do 2 things over here. First of all, we need to give circular progress bar some margin top, because it's being hidden under the app bar. So we're just going to give it some margin top of 20. Actually we'll do 100, and So for the state of the Pokemon data, we want to set, instead of having an empty array, we want to set it as null. That way we can check if it has been initialized or not. Because an empty array counts as a truthy value, but a null will count as a falsy value. So that's why Pokemon data will, when it's not initialized, it will show the circular progress. And the circular progress component will indicate that the application is loading.